Hey guys, welcome to Matt Does Stuff. This is the fourth and final video in my bar build series. As a reminder, that bar is in my kitchen and it looks a bit like this. This week is all about shelves and lights, and then just any finishing touches, and most importantly, filling the bar. So let's pop back over to the kitchen and get started. Okay, so let's talk about shelves and lights. So I've got the base to a stage where I've got the unit in, I've painted it, the worktop is cut, I've taken that off because I'm going to be working above now. What I'm going to have above is two shelves. One, I've marked where they're going to go. You can see I had them too high before. If it was that high I couldn't reach top shelf booze. But I have two shelves there, and I'm going to have LED lights underneath each shelf. So I'm going to make the shelves out of oak to match the worktop. So I've got some bigger offcuts or bigger oak shelves that I'm going to be using, but essentially it's going to be oak. And the way that I'm going to do these, now I could have gone floating, and this will kind of be floating, but what I'm actually going to do is run a strip of oak all the way around to act as a batten. I'm going to lay a shelf on top and then put a piece of oak on the face. Now it won't be truly floating because you'll be able to see up in the gap, but I'm going to that's okay for this project because I'm going to stick some LED lights on this sort of inner edge. So the lights I've got are from a company called Alcove, and I've just got some RGB LED light strips. These are about £25. What you get in the box is two reels of LEDs, a remote control, a power cable, and a on-off button and remote control sensor. These are also controlled, you can control these by an app on your phone as well. I can't demonstrate that because, well, I haven't got the app downloaded and I haven't plugged them in yet, but I'll do that later. But essentially, they are plug and play, so you plug that bit into electric. The control panel there, or the controller, has got a splitter on it, and that goes to two cables, and you can plug the two reels in, which is perfect for my application. The only not perfect bit is that those are not very long, so I want where my plug is behind the unit, so it's going to be fridge and lights. I need the cable to run all the way up and plug into the lights somewhere over here. So what I've also bought is a couple of extension leads separately. Hopefully I'll put the links to all this down in the description below. I've bought a couple of extensions. So these are just 4-pin extensions, and this is a 2-meter cable, and I've got two of those, one for each set of lights. And my plan is to put the light strip on the front face of the shelf. Once I put that on, drill through into this cavity. So I know this is a cavity because I put this up. So this is a battened wall. So drop the cables all the way down the cavity, and they'll come out down there somewhere, and do that for both shelves. So I'm going to be drilling a hole behind the unit here, drilling a hole here and one here, and dropping the cables down. So the only slight snag in my plan is that when I put this wall on, so this is the adjoining wall to my neighbour. A lot of this plaster was crumbling away, and because I didn't want to knock it off and create dust everywhere, I knocked all the loose stuff off, but I decided rather than rebuild it, what I would do was just plasterboard over it. So I battened the wall, drilling in through the brick, battened it out and put plasterboard over it and replastered. So as part of that build, what I did was batten this face. So I've got a batten, I think here, and one here, and somewhere in here I have a horizontal batten as well. Now that batten is going to fall in between both of these shelves. So it means when I try and drop that cable down, it's going to hit that batten. So I'm going to have to drill through the wall and do something with that batten. Luckily, I know where that batten is, because when I was doing this, I was taking progress shots. So I've got a camera, a photo, sorry, of that batten, so I know exactly where it's going to land. So my plan is to drill through the hole, drill a hole through the plaster onto that batten, take a slice out of the batten and run the cable through, and then use that batten to attach the circle that I cut out back in. I'll fill that over and it'll be like I was never there. So yeah, hole at the bottom, hole there, a couple of holes through for the cables to run, and we'll be nearly there. So that's the plan. So yeah, I guess what I'll do now is get on with that, and I'll walk you through it as I go. So I'm cutting out the holes just using a 60mm hole saw attached to the end of my drill. It was a bit awkward to film the one down below, because I had to sort of squeeze in between the units and hold with one hand and film with the other. But you get the general idea. I cut a hole in a wall. So swing and a miss for me in terms of where the batten was. You can see I've caught it a little bit, but I definitely needed to drill this far up, which is a little bit annoying for me, but not the end of the world. What I'll do is just drill up through there. I've only got to run the cable that far to drop that through, so I'll do a workaround for that, and I'll show you how I'm going to do the cable run, fill the hole later on. I cut the battens on the table saw using some oak, and I set the distance based on how thick I want, or how chunky I wanted the front of the shelf to look. So in this case it was the thickness of the shelf plus a batten equaled how chunky I wanted it. In this case I was going for a 50mm front. So when it comes to holding the battens on the wall, now I've cut them, I'm going to be using some Fisher Duo powers, but I am also going to be grabbing onto the stud. So you can see down here I have screwed straight into the stud, and I've done the same at either end. So I've now marked where the studs are on my wall, so I'm going to grab into those studs. But to give it a little bit of extra meat, so that my rum on my top shelf booze doesn't fall off, I am going to use a couple of extras. So I'm going to go 5 fixings on the back. Might be a bit of overkill, but these will allow me just to grab in the cavity, because they do both concrete and the plasterboard. That's why they're called the Duo Power. So I'm going to go for that, put some of those in as well, put some of those on the side, and hopefully that'll be strong enough with the stud and the Fisher Duo Powers. I think these have got a rating of 15 kilos in them, so these would probably be enough. But you know, like I say, don't want my rum falling off. And because I don't want to see the screw heads either, I'm going to be using some oak dowels that I've got just to fill the holes behind the screws, and I'll sand those flat afterwards. So I put the battens on the wall, classic construction for battening, drill some holes, put some raw plugs in, and screw in using some screws. For the plugs, or the bits of dowel I'm going to use as plugs, they were 9mm, so I just cut a 9.5mm hole just to make sure it was easy to get the dowels home, and I just marked on the drill how far I wanted that to go, because obviously I didn't want that to go all the way through, because I still need the screw to grip on some of the wood when I screw that in. So as I mentioned in the sort of intro to this shelving bit, I needed to run the cables through this cavity. So for the bit that's the shelf is sort of side batten that the shelf is going to sit on, you can see I've drilled the 2 holes that will go into the wall to keep it on. But what I've also need to do is mark where the plug is going to come out. So I've marked on a pretty much centralish. What I intend to do is drill through a couple of 8mm drill bits and just use a chisel to knock that into a rectangle, and then hopefully I'll be able to feed the cable through there and then run down this cavity. With the chiseling, I wasn't looking for a perfectly rectangular hole. No one's going to be seeing this once I finished. It was just to square it off enough so it didn't look like two holes drilled by the side of each other, and to give it enough space to run the cable through. And once I'd got those through, I could just screw that bit of batten on the wall and start feeding cables. Starting with the hole that I just cut, I actually drilled through that hole into the plasterboard so that the cable would go through, and then it was just a case of feeding the cable through until I could reach it through the hole I drilled at the bottom. The top hole, or running the cable for the top hole, wasn't actually as bad as I thought it would be. Originally I thought I'd have to drill up through that that cross member that I'd tried to drill a hole through, but in the end it turned out that I'd used a thinner piece of wood than the battens that I'd used for the verticals, which meant there was actually a 1 centimetre gap behind it, which I could just drop the cable down through using a bit of picture wire, which was a stroke of luck. So cables are now run into the cavity wall. Time to close up this hole because I no longer need this one anymore. Well, fingers crossed I don't need this one anymore. So what I intend to do is the circle that I cut out earlier, I intend to use that to blank my hole, and then I can just fill the gap. So what I'm going to do is put in a piece of wood in there, screw this or glue it to the piece of wood, and then fill in around the hole. And that is pretty much about it. The piece of wood that I put into the hole, before I did that, I just screwed a screw into the centre. That gave me something to hold on to while I screwed the two screws on the outside through, so you could just apply a bit of pressure. That way you could get the screws in and do it up tight. And then it was just a case of using my Stanley knife just to take the edges off, so that it was essentially a groove around the edge of the insert. And then I used some 2-part filler, not wood filler, this was just another high performance filler from Everbuild. Mixed those two together and just applied over the hole, spreading flat with a filling knife, and then just sanding back with some 120 grit sandpaper. You'll have noticed in the last shot I also put the dowels in, and while I was waiting for the filler to dry, I just chopped those up flush using my Japanese pull saw. And then it was on to putting the shelf up. So I'm using the same technique as I did for the worktop. In fact, I used the same jig. The wall was pretty much the same, so I just made a few adjustments with the Stanley knife again. Offered it up to the shelf. This time though, instead of using the jigsaw, because it had a bit of a wonky blade on it, I used my handsaw. Not sure it's actually any better with me hand sawing. It's probably still as wonky, but I used my handsaw and my hand plane just to get the shelf in the right shape that I'd want to slot it in. And with the top of the shelf in position, I just measured the height of the shelf plus the battens and cut a front using the table saw. And then I could start to just glue it all in position. I'm not using screws in this case because I didn't want anything showing, so I just glued it all, put something heavy on the shelves to let that dry, and then just glued the front to the shelves using some wood glue, and then holding that in position with some more tape. Once the glue was dry, I was on to finishing, so that meant doing a bit of sanding of all the wooden surfaces just to make sure they were all nice and flush, giving everything a paint up where I'd done all of the filling for the cables, added some wire sort of glass holders to the bottom of the lower shelf, Added the strip of LED lights, which is just an adhesive strip, so they would just peel off and plug in and stick onto the underside of the shelving. Put some caulk around the worktop to hide any of the gaps. And then the final thing I did was just add a bit of Ronseal or Rustins, I think actually, worktop oil to the shelves and the worktop. And then it was just about filling the bar with all my booze. So there we have it. That is the bar build complete. The lights work, the fridge is on, my beer is cold, my rum and my spirits are displayed in all their glory, and I can make cocktails whenever I want now, because that's a thing that I do. Now I've got a bar, and today is no exception. And to celebrate the final bar build, I'm having a tequila matador, which is some sort of tequila and pineapple affair, so let's get amongst it. Cool. That is delicious. Yeah. So that is the end of the bar build. I'll be back soon with some more videos. Remember, in the meantime, you stay safe, get some stuff done.